Hi, my name is Jennifer Smith Parker, Director of Insights at Biospace, and you're listening to Denatured. In this episode, you'll hear from Hakan Goker, Managing Director at M Ventures, and Maina, Bhaman, Partner at Sofinnova Partners. We explore the UK biotech ecosystem, from the Golden Triangle's evolving role to the challenges of scaling companies, unlocking pension capital, and staying globally competitive. Hi, Hakan. Hi, Maina. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Denatured, where we're going to be talking about the European life science investing environment, and this time focusing on the UK. So let's go ahead and kick off. If you can introduce yourselves, that would be great. Hakan, let's start with you.
Thank you. Jennifer, thank you for the opportunity to join. I'm Hakan Goker. I head the biotechnology team at M Ventures. I'm the managing director. M Ventures is the corporate strategic venture arm of Merck Group. We invest along the business lines of the group: therapeutics, life science tools, and electronics. We are a 600 million fund in euros that invests across these sectors, and we have been operating since 2009 as a middle-aged corporate venture group.
Perfect. Maina?
Thanks for having me. I'm Maina Bhaman. I'm a partner at Sofinnova Partners within the capital fund strategy. So we have 7 strategies. The capital fund strategy is the oldest strategy. It's been going for over 30 years. We're now on our 11th fund. It's a $750 million fund. We invest in companies from seed and Series A and continue working with them all the way through. We're part of the build strategy. We have a number of other strategies on the acceleration and growth stage as well.
Perfect. Well, on those great introductions, let's go ahead and kick this off. So the Golden Triangle has long been the UK's biotech anchor. So for those in the audience not aware, the Golden Triangle is Oxford, Cambridge, and London. How do you see its role evolving? And what would it be like to better integrate emerging hubs like Manchester, Sheffield, or Dundee into a unified national ecosystem?
I've been working in what we call the Golden Triangle for quite a long time. I started with Imperial Innovations, which was solely focused on that geography. Look, it's a very important part of the geography in the UK. It is the core hub of where biotech happens, and there are several reasons for that. It's not just because, there is great science, of course, across those 3 geographies, but it's also because the money is here. It's also because the talent we have is concentrated here in biotech. It's a risky business, so you need talent to be able to move from company to company as if things go wrong or even if things go right. And so you do need a bit of an ecosystem. That's why you have hubs. That's not to say that there isn't great science in Manchester, Sheffield, Dundee, Scotland. We have companies in many of those jurisdictions. It's just harder to recruit and retain people. And so the way we seem to look at it, or at least the way, we have a big hub and a couple of companies in Scotland. And the way we try and look at it is we bring the money, the teams to those opportunities and potentially build out elsewhere, either in the Golden Triangle or elsewhere globally, because you need to be able to recruit some talent that you may not get in the local environment.
And total agreement there. And even before the Golden Triangle terminology was coined, it was not necessarily that these three, let's say, cities were really working well together, right? It took a while, and it took a while to build that critical mass into the region. And the critical mass, usually when you look across the globe, falls out of pharma that exists in those locations, right? GSK, AstraZeneca, etc. And kind of trying to reflect that from a broader European angle and maybe from the global outlook, you see the same things. It's not a UK specific aspect. If you look at continental Europe, very few hubs exist that are true hubs. There are a lot of other academic institutions that put out stellar science, but then you struggle how to build that into a well-functioning company. And maybe we get to talk about it later on, but quite a number of times what you do notice is that there is a bit of an aversion in Europe, including the UK, for experienced managers to relocate or find their, let's call it an optimized way of remote working to really help these companies. So what you do end up with is that you have those companies in the hubs, and quite a lot more of a hassle to identify and build companies outside. You will eventually have to bring them into a hub in the lack of the two things that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, when we first talked, that you mentioned about the mobility aspect being a particular issue. And is that something, in a sense of building companies at scale, is really one of the bigger issues? Is there limited talent if you look in the UK, let's say, versus other European countries, or that's not the case? There's a ton of senior level talent here as well.
I think it's not about necessarily that senior level talent doesn't exist. It's there's certain skill sets that are not easy to find, and some of that is business development skill set, some of it is medical skill set, which does exist. It's just if you have a growing biotech ecosystem, that people who haven't had the experience of working in a biotech, which is a little unusual compared to working in a pharma. And so you need people with a certain sort of mindset. People do need a bit of stability, which is not often a given in the biotech environment. And therefore, when there's a hub, there's a confidence that, hey, if this one doesn't work out, the next one will, and I just have to go around the corner, which is why Cambridge, even within that golden triangle, is an area where it's a lot easier to build companies there because there is more of an ecosystem. It exists in London and it exists in Oxford, but it's much stronger in Cambridge because there is that very strong ecosystem already. And, it's the same. It is the same in all of Europe. It's the same in the US. I mean, Boston and San Francisco, there really isn't very much in between. And so you've got to think that the issues are identical, which is building teams of quality and being able to, and yes, we're more used to remote, so you can have team members in different places. But of course, the ability, the ease of being there, the ease of travel, the ease of working with your team. And therefore there's a bit of, because it's not just senior management that you have to hire. You also have to hire scientists, and they need that stability even more so than the senior management.
Correct, I agree. I think on the scientist side, you do need local people. On the management side, I think we as Europeans could actually show a little more flexibility on that. I mean, when we talk about the US, where Maina mentioned Boston and San Francisco, those are big hubs, but there's such big catchment areas of what we call Boston. And some of those distances are easily further away than Amsterdam to London, for example. But the mental kind of separation we have in Europe, which is, comparatively quite a small geography, actually, if you put continental Europe with the UK together. So that flexibility of moving is still not yet set very well in the minds of some of the senior management teams that we see from time to time.
So let me ask you about now the science, because you've both mentioned the very strong science that the UK does have. But I'm curious, when it comes to translating science to companies, where does that process still break down, particularly in tech transfer and spin-out creation?
Spin-out creation used to be, I think, much more of a challenge than it is today. I think we all love to blame tech transfer offices, but actually that's not really, I think, in the past, that was more of an issue. I think today, the processes, at least in the UK, particularly within the Golden Triangle, there's been an attempt to try and make the process better. And I think, yes, it still takes a while because, the understanding of value on both sides of the table. There's also complexity of who's funded the academics, and also there's who are the investors investing in that early science. So all of those things have to come together. I think places like Cambridge and Oxford, they have an ecosystem. They have also institutional money that is there to fund opportunities coming out of those organizations. So that happens much more easily now than it used to, but it's still a challenge. I think the biggest issue is still not so much the funding the company, but it's getting or not so much the getting the science out of the company anymore, out of the institution anymore, but it's more around, can you then get the right people around it and accelerate that early science, get the right money into those opportunities to do that acceleration and attract further money into those opportunities to build real high quality companies. Because that early science has been less easy to fund in the last few years anyways.
Yeah, that's speaking of the funding aspect, I am curious here. I know, Maina, when we first talked, you had talked a bit about pensions actually in the UK and pension reform. And I just wanted to hear more about that, about as a major unlock for UK biotech funding. So what practical changes are needed to get more domestic pension capital into UK venture, and where's the roadblocks now?
Yeah, so let's just clarify that. So the pension fund is never going to go into that very early stage. The pension funds are more about scale capital,
Oh, okay.
and sort of more growth capital, I would say, for later stage investing, because you're never going to be able to attract pension fund money into that very, very early stage company formation piece, in my view. I think there's been a very big attempt by the last couple of governments to try and unlock this money, because there is a lack of that growth capital. I think there are some structural issues around the pension funds have to convince their own investors that they're not wasting, or they're going to get as good returns or longer term returns with this type of investment. They are not necessarily structurally set up to invest in alternatives. And there's an attempt to have the BBB as a consolidator and bring some of that money together. I think the biggest issue, if I think about it, has been how pension funds report and how we as venture investors report. So that's one aspect. There's the aspect of fees, because the pension funds are set up in a certain way to only accept certain fees, and it's a mismatch with venture fees. And so some of these things are being attempted to be fixed, but they're not easy fixes. And I think, the BBB along with government are definitely trying to try and do things, but it's going to take a bit of time. It's already taken quite a bit of time. I think the date that they need to get the money in is by 2030. And I think I've seen maybe 2 deals being done so far, 1 or 2 deals being done so far with the pension money. I don't know if you agree with that, Hakan.
I mean, we are a corporate venture fund with single LP, but nonetheless, we work with a lot of other VCs, and we do hear and feel some of those struggles, especially when it comes to growth of companies. And I guess the important thing that I could comment on is that a solution has to be found, because we are seeing a lot more of the early stage venture capital firms folding or not being able to invest any longer, which is a significant threat to innovation actually seeing any day of light outside of labs. And this is not necessarily just a UK problem, but we do see that also in other geographies in Europe, certainly. And there is a threat for the ecosystem. Some money needs to come in to make sure that smaller venture funds are able to do what they do at the earlier stages of the cycle. And venture funds actually do have to support that as part of maintaining a longer outlook in how to build value in each geography, actually.
Speaking about early stage funding, I know we talked a bit about that in our initial conversations, Hakan, and I'm just curious when it comes to VCs, I know we talked a bit about them behaving more like crossover investors, and there's also the rise in corporate venture and evergreen models. So for both of you, how do you expect the investor landscape in the UK to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? Crystal ball time.
Well, hopefully positively. I mean, I'm still hoping that the last 2 years, especially the last 2-3 years, is a kind of downward blip that we will get out of. And we're seeing some improvement. Venture funds, they're under their own set of pressures that they need to meet, and quite a lot of cash has been locked up in companies that need to be progressed further before they can be exited, which then returns the cash back to the fund, and then they can raise their next fund. So it's been kind of miserable for mid-stage companies to get financed for the last couple of years. And I mean, on the positive side, we are seeing a lot more money deployed by corporate venture funds, a lot more of the corporate venture funds being created or upped in their allocations. And we're also seeing that through our activities in life science tools, for example, and electronics. We're also seeing that happening in other sectors, not just therapeutics. I think therapeutics is probably one of the oldest ones, but that is on the positive side. So hoping that the UK ecosystem will re-flourish once people have had their exits and had the time to rethink or how to continue building value also at the early stages, not just investing in the Series B or whatever the classification is, to actually turn the clinical proof of concept card. And we are very happy that we still have firms like Sofinnova that we work with even at the early stages. It would be otherwise quite tough.
Yeah, look, I think we've had all of this goes in cycles. We've had a pretty difficult couple of years. As Hakan said, I think things are on the positive move now. The public markets are a bit more open. There's been a reasonable amount of M&A. And so you're seeing people come back into venture investing. Funds like ours never stopped, but I think it is a challenging time for some of the smaller funds to raise capital until they start to show some returns. And we all have our masters, and LPs also have to get returns in order to continue to fund the system. So I think you will see a bit more consolidation, in my view, in smaller funds becoming part of bigger organizations, and organizations like ours having the breadth to be able to do seed stage companies and then Series A companies and then later stage companies, so that you can keep that ecosystem. That ecosystem is super important. We need early stage deals in order to then be able to fund those later stage deals. And I think you ended up funding more later stage deals because the ability to go from early to late requires a lot of capital. And if you don't have access to later stage capital, you're stuck, or you're sitting there. And if you don't have M&A, you're also stuck having to fund those. And you don't want to give, I mean, if the companies are doing well, you're not going to stop funding those. But you've had to retrench and fund your own companies rather than create new companies. So I think it is cyclical. We do require open public markets. We also require larger funds to be able to continue funding. And we need those early stage funds that can continue to build new and interesting companies. And that's kind of how we've set up our firm, to be able to do all of those so that we're not solely dependent on the external environment.
Well, thank you so much, Hakan, and thank you so much, Maina, for talking about this topic. It's interesting to hear the challenges that the UK has, but I'm still hearing optimism going forward, and that there is a lot of good science potential. So thank you so much again for your time. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes of Denatured, please turn into biospace.com.